Stephen Miller defending the United States military, sinking a boat that it claims was being run by the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua to smuggle drugs into the United States. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has vowed to defend his country's sovereignty. President Trump says that if Venezuelan jets put our naval ships in a, quote, dangerous position, they'll be shot down. So what happens next? Let's bring in the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Brian Mast of Florida. Chairman, thank you so much for being here. I find it curious that the president of Venezuela says, hey, if they put our sovereignty, in the drug running business, what is the president of Venezuela talking about?
He's trying to defend what it is that they are doing. They have a very specific concert of coordination between Venezuela, Maduro, China is in that mix, groups like Hezbollah, other foreign terrorist organizations, Tren de Aragua, you could put in Mexico, the Sinaloa cartel, others. They are literally working in concert to kill Americans, to create American addicts, to smuggle drugs, fentanyl, other things into the border state of Florida and other places like that. And President Trump is saying, just as much as we're not allowing another illegal immigrant into the United States of America, we're not going to allow the trafficking of people, of drugs, of arms, of you name it. We are controlling our borders, and we're going to control our backyard as well.
Do you believe, Chairman, that it's time for a regime change? And what should the U.S. role be in potentially that happening?
I would look at that, I'd juxtapose it to Iran as well. People have been talking about that with Iran, right? So the United States preference might be that we would love to see somebody different there other than Maduro, just like we'd love to see somebody different there other than the Ayatollah in Iran. There is absolutely a bounty on Maduro because of the things that he and his regime have been doing to the United States of America, but we want to see these things done by policy from the grassroots coming up, from the people taking a change stance within their country like the people of Syria did to oust Bashar al-Assad, so that we don't have these decades-long civil wars that go on in these places. That is the preference in policy for us, that it happen from the grassroots.
Well, look, the difference between a President Trump and, say, a President Biden or Obama is they would just placate these people. It was just appeasement, just allow them to continue to do what they're doing. President Trump, true to his brand and what he believes in, to his core, is trying to change that equation. But let me transition, because you got a big job, foreign affairs. Let's transition to what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. Russia had one of the biggest attacks ever on Kyiv with 800 drones reportedly attacking that. What's going to change the equation there?
Look, we see, obviously, everybody knows, Russia and Ukraine in kinetic conflict. What's allowing Russia to continue this when they're cut off from a lot of the world? It's where they're not cut off from the rest of the world. And so China's buying, let's say, 20% or more of their oil and gas, hundreds of billions of dollars a year. To that same point, and this is why India is such a big deal right now, they have upped from being almost a negligible purchaser of Russian oil and gas before the Ukraine war to now purchasing hundreds of millions of dollars of Russian oil and gas that they weren't purchasing before, allowing Russia to prosecute this war. Obviously, North Korea providing the troops to Russia against Ukraine. And so you look at this and you say, we have to deal with those that are on the outside that are still allowing, because of their relationships, their cooperation, Russia to continue this war. And it really puts to a fine point that because of cooperation, Russia, China, India, North Korea are essentially at war with Ukraine, Europe, the United States of America because of those cooperations. And we're trying to deal with that in an economic way so that it doesn't come to a kinetic way.
When you talk about the financial way, I've seen this through the decades. I've seen president after president say, oh, we're going to use sanctions. At some point, why don't we use all the sanctions? Like, we keep talking about this sanction and that sanction. Like, why not cut them off of the financial system? That would get their attention. And look, the energy, drill baby drill, being energy independent, it's a huge part of the equation for the United States, and you can't just flip a switch and it starts to be on. But I don't understand, Chairman, why not use all the sanctions to make the difference against Russia so they really feel the pain?
No, I would agree with you in totality, right? You can't be down the middle of the road in this. There are obviously peripheral things that the United States of America has to deal with to say, we've allowed ourselves to get into a bad situation with China because of our dependencies on a lot of the minerals that they extract from the earth and that they refine, and we need to get those minerals from them for our own good. That puts us in a tougher spot when we're negotiating. We're trying to reduce that tough spot that we're in. Same thing with any of those countries. We need to make sure they don't have those dependencies in totality. We need to make sure that the only thing Russia knows the world needs from them is a less powerful Russia. That's what we need. Anything that allows them to be more powerful, we're not on the side of. Anything that weakens them, we are on the side of because of where they are at in the world. That's the path that they chose.
That's what I love about President Trump is he offers clarity and simplicity. It's very clear. There are clear lines. Congressman, you're the chairman of Foreign Affairs, but you're also a congressman from Florida. You hear all this flailing from the Democrats about Alligator, Alcatraz, oh my, and Panhandle, Pokey, which is one of my new favorite names. Whoever's making up the names of these places, they need to give that person a raise, by the way. But what say you? You're in Florida. What should we make of this?
It is pure politics that Democrats want to get rid of these places that detain illegal immigrants before they're deported. And the fine point I'm going to put on saying this, why this is pure politics, just down the road from the Alligator Alcatraz is a place called the Chrome Detention Facility. It's an ICE detention facility. It's been in place for decades. You don't hear Democrats complaining about it at all. Why? Because they haven't made it this political football, because maybe it doesn't have as provocative a name or some other reason, but they're not making it a big deal. It's all politics with these other places. Now, I'd give you one other quick point. Just financially, I like to use common sense. These places, a lot of them are temporary. Every single day, we're going to have less and less illegal immigrants. Obviously, President Trump, well done, shut down the southern border, no more illegal immigration. So I'd rather see a lot of these dollars go into our local county detention lockups for all of our sheriff's departments, do permanent infrastructure for them that they can use for criminals, whether illegal immigrants or otherwise across the board, instead of these temporary detention facilities. I think it'd just be a better use of dollars. But for the Democrats, it's pure politics that they do not want any place to house illegal immigrants. They just want them out in your neighborhood like they were doing catch and release before.
Hey, not a problem in Florida, but the rest of the country, 287G, if you don't know what it is, Sheriff, you better get your act in order, because that is what we need in this country. And by the way, let's get that naming person, what did they call it? Chrome? Come on, we can come up with a better name than that. That's probably what it needs. And then AOC could go down there and shed some fake tears. It'll be great. It'll be just wonderful. All right, Congressman Brian Mast,
We'll
Chairman
see if we can find
another
better name for Chrome.
All right, very good.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.